Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Colin for YouTube. Today is the late Dennis Patrick's birthday, and now I'm not here to send him happy birthday, or happy heavenly birthday, but I'm here to talk about the characters he portrayed, Jason McGuire and Paul Stoddard, and actually Sheriff George Patterson a bit. Um, by the way, he played Sheriff George Patterson in the movie House of Dark Shadows. So he plays this con artist named Jason McGuire who isn't just going to be a main character or a main focus. Yeah, he is. But he's going to bring another character who's even more important, or if not just as important, as his character to Dark Shadows, and that character would be Willie Loomis, obviously, who ends up letting Barnabas out. But what did I think of Dennis Patrick's Jason McGuire? Simply superb. He was the villain that you wanted to wrap in the mouth, but then there's the villain. He's the guy who was cool enough you wanted to wrap your arm around him and say, "Hey, let's cut a deal." He was, I hate to say the word smooth criminal, go all Michael Jackson on you guys, but he was. I mean, you could tell he had a very, very interesting way of working his craft. I don't mean just Dennis Patrick. I mean the character he portrayed. That Dennis Patrick's craft is he owned the characters he played. A lot of like other actors would and do today. But the way he handled Jason McGuire is this sort of smooth talking, sly criminal who wants to be your buddy and seems nice enough, but once you get to know him and once he gets leverage over you, it's a completely different thing. And Liz Stoddard, Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, could attest to this. And he said there was Paul's body in the basement, but we know there wasn't. That kind of dedication to that specific plot point. Oh, is really good. Oh, by the way, to Don Schmidt and Susie, I think I have it in mind what was underneath the basement in uh, the house on the web. Um, I would say that that's where the guy buried the treasure. There wasn't he's selling that there's a body, but I would say that really he wants to stay there and dig it up. He wants to stay there and dig it up because that's where he put his money. That's what I would say, and that's something Dark Shadows doesn't do. Dark Shadows doesn't have Jason McGuire. He does dig up the where Paul Stoddard is buried, and we know he isn't. But there's no money there either. Um, the money, they somehow snuck the money out from under Liz. Um, Jason split the money that Liz gave him with to Paul. And that brings me in, and Jason's demise was really well done too. I mean, he's the first person they feed to Barnabas, quite literally. Um, Willie, Jason's own greed gets the better of him, and why not? I mean, that's how Willie opened up the coffin, was greed, and accidentally finding the secret passage in the mausoleum. Um, my One of my favorite scenes with Dennis Patrick before Barnabas is ever let out, and it's really when he first shows up, and he's sitting in the where Maggie works, and he just looks like a guy who's been sailing the world. He just looks like a normal sailor. He doesn't look like somebody who's a con artist or a grifter, if you will. Whatever term you want to use, he just looks like this normal dude. And when you think about it that way, meaning he dresses normal, he doesn't dress like a sleazeball, he just dresses like this sailor who goes from port to port. And it lets you know that anybody in Dark Shadows could be a villain. And he's not the first one to really demonstrate that, but he's another person who does demonstrate it. To me, like Matthew, David, they were somebody who let you know anybody could be a villain. But Dennis Patrick does it with a sense of style that I really enjoy. Speaking of Paul Stoddard, oh, by the way, yeah, he gets strangled by Barnabas. We don't see Barnabas bite him, but Barnabas probably did bite him for biting him's sake. Now, though Dennis Patrick was not the first actor to play Paul Stoddard, because this is what I find most interesting. This is the one I find most interesting of all three characters Dennis Patrick played. We don't see Paul Fabini's face, but here's the thing. This actually helps Dennis Patrick when they bring him in for the role of Paul Stoddard, because primarily we do see the back of Paul Stoddard's head. Yeah, we hear his voice and laughter, and it doesn't sound like anything like Dennis Patrick, mind you, but the fact that we don't see his face really helps Dennis Patrick's casting later on, like casting for this role later on, like when they bring him in to play Paul Stoddard. I do find it still to this day one of the most odd selections not to show his face. But in reality, you got to look at a lot of things that was going on Dark Shadows at the time to probably really help understand why they did this, in my point of view. And again, this is just my opinion. Please don't take this as fact and run with it. In my view, there's a lot of reasons they don't show Paul Stoddard. They don't show Paul Stoddard's face with the actor Paul Fabini. And I do want to mention this before I get into Dennis Patrick playing the character. Number one, they've had this very story. I don't mean Jason McGuire. I mean this very story of something being in the basement since the very beginning of the show. So, and we're told during, whether you want to call it the Jason McGuire's, arc going into Barnabas's arc at the same time. Because keep in mind, we always see Dark Shadows is when they're in an arc, they're not just in one specific arc all the time. They're going through, there's a couple different stories going on within the realm of the actual story you're watching because other characters are involved. So, when you look at Paul Stoddard's Paul Fabini, why don't they reveal his face? Okay, keep in mind they never really reveal the character's face ever prior to this. And really, there's no reason to, I don't mean that to be sly or condescending, but sometimes it's best not to reveal a character even after you know the character's in existence, because it gives you something to come back to for a reveal later. And then again, was that their number one reason? I don't know. I'd like to think they're more so their number one reason. They were more doing this to get it out the way, really. Again, I could be off. Because, again, it was from the beginning. It was something that they needed to wrap up and needed to... Okay, why is Dennis Patrick's character, Jason McGuire, here? Is Paul Stoddard really dead? Those are questions that Dark Shadows did need to answer during this arc. And they do. They tell you, yeah, Paul Stoddard was hit over the head, but he's still alive. He's not dead. He's not buried in the basement. That was all just some con game by Jason. Jason, lied. So, no, again, the other thing going on, Barnabas has arrived. By the time Liz and Jason are about to get married, Barnabas is well out of his coffin. Maggie Evans is in Wynncliffe. A lot's happened. Dark Shadows moves really fast when you start watching. It starts, people say about things starting off slow, but once you start watching Dark Shadows and you get past this, is Patrick right? Is my buddy Patrick McCray right? Once you get past the first 10 episodes, it starts flying by. Yeah, pretty much. When you get to episode 10, and then after, everything just seems to snap its finger and go quicker and quicker and quicker. Even as I'm going through the episodes and going back through the beginning episodes, it just seems to move really fast. So Barnabas being back, and they needed to get look. Maggie had a when you look at it from the other standpoint too of why get why not show Paul Stoddard's face? Because again, you just don't need to. And another thing too is the other character Dennis Patrick does play, Jason McGuire. He's going to get killed off, so there's no chance in hell that they're going to bring this character back. So, which is really, again, really intriguing. I like the move not to show Paul Stoddard's face. I think it was bold. And, when they do cast Dennis Patrick, he does a really great job. He tells you that he hasn't seen his daughter in all these years and how sorry he is. And Carolyn isn't having it right away. Did I believe that he was working for the Leviathans? I mean, it's not a hard sell. I mean, he's a con man and a thief himself, so it's not hard to sell that he would sell his own daughter, his most precious possession, which was his daughter. I mean, really, I get that Carolyn is the heir to is fruit of his loins, if you will, but is she really his to sell? He didn't really raise her. He wasn't around. But hey, you made a deal. You made a deal. Sheriff George Patterson in House of Dark Shadows. Dennis Patrick doesn't have a ton of screen time, but the screen time he does have in that movie, he makes it count. He doesn't have a ton of dialogue. He has enough dialogue to get the character across, but he also has enough appearance to let you know he is the sheriff in this town. And really, at the end of the day, when you're filming a movie, if you have law enforcement, that's all that matters. I'll say this: any more screen time, and Dennis Patrick is gonna feel like Charles Cypress's character in Halloween. He's gonna be walking with them, and really he almost does, because he is helping hunt down Barnabas. That though we don't see him a bunch, we see him like I think one time before everybody goes missing, and it's like nobody's around, and you hear Jeff Clark receives a note from a guy who looks like he's been on a fishing dock, and he says, "Here, Roger, Professor Stokes and Roger Collins want you to meet them here." You see Sheriff George Patterson before that, and that's pretty much it. I mean, he is in the movie. He helps stake Carolyn. I mean, he doesn't stake her. I do find that interesting. That's always been real interesting, and I get why they did it, because it's Professor Stokes, and you want Van Helsing to stake at least one vampire, considering he's not going to stake the main one. But I found it really interesting that it's not George Patterson who stakes Carolyn. Interesting decision. Really cool. Alright, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry if it's not too terribly long. And have a great day, or great evening, sorry.